So to set the stage, and I'm sure a lot of folks here identify with this, what we've seen in the last 18 months is a lot of clients that come into our pipeline or the PE firms that we talk with, more companies than ever before are missing targets. They're seeing lower pipeline, they're seeing lower traffic, lower conversions in some cases. We've seen a lot of CMOs or CROs or CEOs get fired or changed over. Boards are pushing teams to figure out how to use AI. Companies are leveraging or trying to figure out how to leverage AI in the best way possible. And just in general, I feel like there's not enough of a clear understanding of what's happening. And what I want to do today is give you guys a framework to think about not just where we are today, but what is going to be the reality in a world with AI, even 3 years down the road or 5 years down the road, and how to think about building your businesses based on that reality. Because the current state will just keep evolving. There's a few platforms today. Tomorrow there'll be new ones. There'll be some changes or adjustments to how these platforms index companies, but the evergreen truths will not change. So that's what I really want to impress upon you guys today, to think about the problem in a different way. And so with that, the first thing that I'd say is how buyers are making purchasing decisions is changing in real time. Given you guys are talented marketers, I'm sure you guys understand this, but I want to just dive deep into this to help you understand how deep this actually goes. So this is one of my, I would say, most popular drawings or most viral drawings. And I first published this back in 2021, and back then, or 2020, and back then, the reality was there was like this handoff, marketing to sales, sales does the closing, marketing generates the leads. And the idea was that now in 2020 or 2021, there was a shift where marketing and sales owned all stages of the buyer journey together. And around the same time is when Gartner published this infographic. I'm sure you guys have seen some variation of this. And it's also around this time where attribution became a very hot topic, because if you look at the main buyer journey stages, problem identification, solution exploration, requirements building, and supplier selection, there were so many different touch points on different platforms that were happening that there was this question of like, well, what actually gets the credit for closing a deal? And so we saw this rush where everybody's trying to implement some type of multi-touch attribution solution, first touch, last touch, multi-touch, weighted touch, and trying to figure out, okay, is this customer coming through because we invested in Google Ads or we did something on SEO or we ran a webinar, et cetera. And this was great for attribution companies because they were able to sell more software, but the core problem still remained, which is how do we scale the business faster, even if we're able to kind of track things a little bit better? And the underlying problem with the attribution movement or the focus on that was that the core business problem still exists, which is that we need to find more customers and we need to nurture more of them to close one. And in an AI first world, it's almost like attribution no longer matters. And the way the buyer journey has really shifted is that previously, when the buyer would actually talk to your business, would be at this solution exploration stage. And now we're seeing more and more buyers talk to companies when they're ready to buy. They're already in the process of buying, they've made their decision. They literally just need a shopping cart to make a decision. And this is true in enterprise sales as much as it is in transactional sales. It just might take enterprise sales longer to get there, but that's where the market is going. And this is what changes kind of how we need to think about marketing and everything that we invest into. And there's some data points. I'm sure you guys have seen stuff like this, like zero-click searches are on the rise on their AI overviews, and it's, usurping traffic from SEO and paid media results. So I understand that everybody gets stuff like that, but there's also real impact to companies. Like Monday.com is a famous example because it's a public business, but a lot of companies that we talk to have seen 20, 30, 40% declines in search traffic. They're seeing decline in lead volumes, and they're struggling to hit the same numbers that they previously hit before ChatGPT and Perplexity and Gemini and all these platforms were out there. And so what is actually happening, and that's kind of where the buyer journey is connected. And it's really understanding how the buyer is making different decisions or is behaving in a different way. So previously, if I had a problem that I was trying to figure out a solution for, I would search for some sort of a short query on Google. The new behavior is that we just ask ChatGPT and Gemini, and instead of clicking on multiple pages, we just get an answer to the question. This leads to a decline in top of funnels SEO traffic. On the solution exploration side, previously, I would go to multiple review websites, maybe check your website, check your competitor's website, click around. Now I can just ask AI platforms to compile a short list of solutions. You're going to see lower traffic from Capterra, G2, and all these other referring websites that help you figure out what the right solution is. And you'll also see lower traffic to your solutions pages, to your features pages. On the requirements building side, you would have previously looked through features and benefits, maybe used RFPs, talked to advisors. Now you just ask AI platforms like, hey, I'm this type of business. Give me a full list of requirements and help me figure out what the right budget to spend is. And this leads to fewer demos and fewer show up rates and fewer MQLs. And then finally, we get to supplier selection where people are actually ready to make a decision. Previously, we would go through long internal review processes to build a business case. Now we just ask AI to build a business case for us. And this leads, in a lot of cases, to higher close rates for the winners and plummeting close rates for anyone who does not show up in the recommendation on the engines. And so, what I want to help you guys understand is that this new behavior is the new reality, and it's only going to increase or improve from the customer standpoint. And so, how you look at your funnel or how you've looked at it previously is not as applicable in today's environment. And so, the framework we're going to walk you through, I'd say there's four components to it. One is just understanding this long tail of self-education. Two is building iconic positioning, and it's something that we talk about on the product marketing side, but I'll dive deeper into that. Three is becoming citation worthy, something that AI platforms actually index. And four is to enable AI like sales reps. And I would say out of all four of these, the most important one is actually number four is like the immediate area to invest into. And I'll explain how that applies as we get there. The key point to know is that you have to build companies in a way where you have to meet buyers where they are, and they're constantly educating themselves without ever talking to you. And I'll give you guys some examples here. First, this is just our podcast. So this is a standard query. What are the top podcasts for private equity investors to learn about value creation? Great, we come up first. This answer is very similar to what you would have typed on Google for any term that you're in the market for: top membership software, top accounting software, top construction management software, etc. So it's not that much different than SEO. And I think what one of the conversations about GEO and SEO that is getting kind of muddled is that people are equating these two things to be the same thing, but they are not, because this is just one type of query. What is actually happening is more queries like this, where people are saying, I need, like they're giving in detail what they actually want and giving more filters or scenarios, and then asking for way more detailed recommendations from the engine. So here's an example. I need to build a funnel to sell products online. I want to have a sales page, one-click upsells, automate email follow-ups. What are the top three software solutions that can help me with this? In the old world where AI platforms did not exist, you would never have typed this search query in Google. In fact, it would always have 0 to 10 searches and more likely than not, 0 searches a month. And so you would never need to produce a piece of content that ranks, quote unquote, for something like this. But in this case, you can ask now, and the depth of queries is increasing. I'm going to touch on that later as well. And so as depth increases, the type of content you need to produce to rank or show up in the answers changes as well. Here's another example. I need a software to manage my fleet of delivery vehicles. I want to track drivers, vans, mileage, fuel usage, depreciation, etc. What are the best solutions for this? Okay, it gives me solutions. And in this case, it's a company called Fleetio. We know them well. And they do a great job with some of this work. So that's why I'm using them as an example. Then I ask a follow-up. I have 200 vans. Would you still recommend Fleetio or something else? And then it starts giving some other potential competitors for the same type of solution. And then the third question I ask is, can you make me a business case for me to choose Fleetio so I can pitch it to my CEO and board? And the platform creates the business case for me. This this step previously could never have been done on Google. You would have to do all of this work, and it would take you hours to actually pull all this together. And that's the change that's happening is your customer is going to do these types of searches for whatever market you're in before they actually make a decision. And if you are not coming up on these answers, odds are you will not be chosen. And maybe you're being chosen now because Google still makes up a big chunk of volume today. But if we think 2 years out, 5 years out, you're going to fall into irrelevance the more invisible you are. And here's a way to kind of think about the urgency. So right now, 9% of total search queries are going on ChatGPT. By next year, it's supposed to be 25%. So there's a real competition happening for this real estate of how do we train these AI platforms to give your solution as an answer in the right possible way. And again, I come back to this framework, which is that the buyer journey is shifting. And when the buyer talks to you is going to be later. If I can build a whole business case without ever doing a demo with you, then that means I probably will build the business case, look at your website, talk to my CEO, and unlock the budget, and then just get on a call with you and buy, or just start a free trial and convert without ever interacting with your business, or go to a competitor because they showed up and you didn't. And so the idea is that if you're invisible on these platforms, you'll inevitably see a decline in revenue growth and EBITDA margins. And we see this in real time, like when we work with our clients, we see rising CAC, we see reduced GTM efficiency, decreased brand visibility, and it impacts EBITDA, exit readiness, a bunch of other things in terms of overall business value. And so the invisibility piece needs to be addressed as soon as possible. And you're going to see this across the board. So the more invisible you are, the lesser brand power you have, the lesser conversions you have across the board. It's going to increase your CAC, it's going to lower your close rates. And the flip side is also true. If you're prominent on these platforms, if you're being used in citations, it's going to build a stronger brand, and you're going to see higher conversions on other channels as well, because you're going to show up on citations and they're going to search on Google, they're going to click a branded ad, and you're going to see way higher conversion rates on those ads, or on your outreach through outbound, or on your ABM campaigns, or anywhere else that you're deploying marketing dollars into. So this means that we need to look at different metrics to figure out, are we actually effective as a brand, as a company on these platforms? So some core metrics to think about, and this is going to keep evolving. I'd say share of voice on AI answers. What percentage of time are you actually showing up versus what you could show up for? Two is citation frequency, like how often are you actually being used in a citation for an answer? Third is branded search volume, because it is an indirect indicator of how much you're coming up on these platforms. And then finally, revenue impact. And as attribution improves here, you'll be able to actually see, okay, more of these leads came from ChatGPT or Gemini or some of these other platforms. And you just want to be able to track, like, how visible are we constantly against competitors, against the total share of potential queries that exist. And it's way deeper, like we discussed, than in an SEO world. So it's not just about search impression share or number of queries and what's your ranking. It's what percent is your visibility. And there's some tools like PKI that you can use. But I would go a step further to really understand, like, what are all the queries that your market is actually asking about and could ask about, and make sure that you're showing up for those most important queries. And I'm going to touch on that shortly here as well. And finally, your brand awareness is key to appearing in LLMs. So the stronger your brand, the more likely the LLMs are to reference you. And this to me is a very important insight into understanding what the LLMs are actually trying to do. And if you just step back, is to say the developers behind the LLMs, or what the platforms are intended to do, is that if a user has a query, they're trying to find the highest authority source with the most expertise to give the user an answer so that they never have to query again. And with that logic, then that means that if you appear as the highest authority or expertise resource, and it's not about backlinks, I don't want to go, like, you don't want to use the old SEO language. This is about who is the most helpful on this query. That's the person that's going to be used in the citation or in the answer. And helpfulness is based on how actually you're addressing the pain point, more than whether somebody of an authority website is linking back to you. It's no longer enough. So with that, it means that it's no longer enough to produce content that ranks purely for SEO and organic as a way to drive traffic. So what drives citations? And I'm basing this just on how we see the world. I'd say one is iconic positioning, two is expertise, and three is distribution. And iconic positioning is just this broad concept that we talk about a lot here at How to SaaS. But what I mean is this. So in product marketing, what you're taught is your customer has a pain point, and your product is the prescription for that pain point. So if someone is struggling to manage invoices, well, it turns out that your product has invoice management, and that's a prescription. And so your product marketing should address the pain point and say, stop using, Excel and Google Docs to send invoices, use our product, right? Great. The problem with this is that most companies, their product marketing is based around just the pain points that they actually have a solution for. What we think is the future is you need to think about your end customer and all the pain points that they face on a day-to-day basis with the jobs that they're doing or the problems that they're trying to solve or what their operation is, and think about solutions to all of those pain points and make prescriptions and recommendations and provide them with guidance, even if you don't have a solution for it. Over time, your product can creep into some of those other areas where you can provide more solutions. But as just a fiduciary responsibility to that client or that customer, you need to do as much as possible to give them recommendations in those areas. And if you do that, you're going to have a stronger brand and more of an iconic position. And if you think about the brands that you really follow, they're not always just talking their book and talking about what they want to sell. And that's the strong content strategy that everybody needs to start adopting. And there are many ways to build iconic positioning, expertise, providing experiences, having infrastructure and communities and ecosystems and marketplaces and a bunch of other things that you see some of the leading providers do. But the big one I want to focus on is expertise, because more and more in a world where you can use AI to produce content, and I'm sure people here are active on LinkedIn, it's full of just AI slop and content that all sounds the same and everybody has the same images or types of images and same types of content. Expertise is the silver bullet. It is what stands out from the noise and really separates out what here. This is something that is truly helpful to hear something that is just a commoditized piece of content. So more and more on your team, inside your business, there should be market experts or experts that can truly help your customers that are in charge of producing the content that you're putting out there. This could be the founder or the CEO, or it could be someone that is a resident expert on your content team. You can't just have a junior content marketing manager producing content in a way to stand out in a market like this, because everybody, the velocity of content is too much, the volume is too much, and standing out is significantly harder. So making a top 10 list of your market is just not going to cut through all that noise. And just a couple of examples, like this is Basecamp founders. They wrote these two books. I'm sure you've read at least one of them or at least heard of them. And they also pioneered Ruby on Rails. And just through this type of work, they have established themselves as experts in the area of work and on the development side. And they have raging fans based on this expertise. I don't see enough companies doing work like this. And this is how you cut through the noise. And you need to have resident experts to be able to produce that. On our side, we do something similar, and it's based on the books that we've written and the podcasts that we've written. And we do not optimize for GEO or SEO or anything like that. And we do casual checks like this, and it still turns out that we're number one because of the work that we're putting out there in terms of content on YouTube and podcasting and webinars and on our blog and social and everywhere else. So more and more, I would just say, who is providing the expertise inside your business to the market, and how much expertise are you actually disseminating out there? Because not only do you need the expertise, but you need the volume and the distribution to be out there in all these channels. And I'd say that's the third pillar, which is being active on all of these platforms. And the more distribution you have, the more citations that you will be showing up on. And this is an interesting data point to think about, which is 1/3 of the cited pages on AI platforms have zero organic search presence. That means that they're not really ranking for anything on SEO, but ChatGPT and these platforms are still using them in citations because they are providing true expertise that can be used as training data. And this number is only going to increase. What you're going to see is a world where SEO ranking content in a lot of cases is not helpful, even though tactically it gets traffic and it might get conversions. So the more helpful you are, you're going to see it being cited more. And then as SEO evolves, you're going to see it getting more rankings as well. So build content to be helpful first, and think about organic search presence second. And that's going to lead to more presence on the AI platforms and more visibility. And here's what this looks like. This is Shopify, and one of the darlings of the Toronto community, but they have a huge YouTube following, almost 1 million subscribers, and they put out a ton of content for people selling stuff online. This is not optimized for SEO. This is a deep amount of content that's, sometimes 10 minutes, sometimes an hour on their YouTube channel. I think this is one of the trends that we're going to see. More and more SaaS companies are going to have podcasts, which that's been happening for a little while, but they're going to have detailed YouTube channels because this is a way to stand out distinctly. It makes it human. There's expertise that you can provide through this platform that you cannot on any other platform. Similarly, on podcasting, this is Jobber. They work with home service companies, and so they interview folks that have built great home service businesses, and that ends up being things that an example of something that would get indexed and qualify you as an expert. Here's another example. This is in the direct-to-consumer space. I'm a huge golf fanatic. I follow a ton of golf content. This has nothing to do with selling golf clubs. It is a ton of educational content with golf pros, and you learn a ton by watching this content. And then when it comes time to buy, it makes an impact. I'm going to jump back and forth as when I ask ChatGPT, hey, I'm looking for new irons, these are the specs, this is how I normally score, et cetera, et cetera, it gives me tailor-made clubs as its recommendation. So it translates to commerce, even though this is purely educational content. And we don't see enough B2B brands have a presence like this on Instagram and other places that are more direct to consumer, even though there's a ton of attention there and a ton of conversations happening and a ton of consumption of content happening on those platforms. And then finally, I would say user-generated content is super important. So I think Nikita's on the webinar. I'd use this as an example of him posting stuff about my book is just as important as our business posting about it. There are reviews on all these platforms, G2, Capterra, et cetera, wherever you have Trust Radius. And then there's YouTube videos on other people, not your brand, posting about your platform as a potential comparable. All of the, and you can check Reddit threads and Quora answers and Medium articles and things on Substack. Like all of this is that the more user-generated references you have and the more you can encourage that, the more that will be used as training data because this is what these platforms are being trained on. And I would say a lot of companies are invisible on these platforms themselves. Like if there's a Quora question related to accounting software, if you're competing with QuickBooks or FreshBooks or Xero, and you are not showing up in those answers, odds are you being in citations is going to be lower. It's just a fact of life. So the more you do the expertise-based content and that is actually educational and helpful to the customer, the more the user-generated content is actually going to increase, and it's kind of like a flywheel that feeds itself. Um, the key thing to understand is that going forward, AI platforms will actually be your best sales reps. And to me, this is the holy grail of the whole thing. Is that previously a user would or customer would interact with a sales rep because they're trying to learn more about the solution, or even if they did some self-education on your website, they're doing a demo to try to figure out, can you actually help me or not? Because now they can ask these types of queries on these platforms, they're going to be your best sales reps, but they're also going to be your competitors' best sales reps. And it's not at a point of emergency yet. Like there's a study that shows what types of queries are being asked. Right now, navigational and informational at the top of the funnel, right, is getting more, whereas on the transactional side, Google still has the bulk of the queries. And then generative in terms of like if you're creating an image or article or whatever, it's being used for that. I think this transactional number is going to climb a lot in the next year or so, and the informational number is going to climb further as well. So if that's the case, if I'm searching for answers at all stages of the customer journey, I need that education, and we need companies to be able to be in the answers to actually educate customers at that level. And so a good framework to think about this, and we talk about this in our C-level marketing program as well, is there are 25 key sales questions, and they go by the different buyer journey stages. And if you think about AI as a sales rep, and I'm going to jump back and forth here for a second. If you think of AI as your best sales rep, think about the type of training that you provide your sales reps. You give them market knowledge, customer insights, you teach them about your product, you teach them about your pricing, you enable them with resources. And a lot of companies, you can't actually get on the phone until you've been trained for 2 weeks. You take on all this training before you start dialing or talking to prospects. And and what we want to actually do is we want to enable the platforms with the same knowledge. The problem is, inside most companies, most of this content is hidden. So what we provide our sales reps in terms of education sits in terms of PDFs, or it sits on a platform like Seismic or Showpad. It does not actually exist in a way that the AI platforms can train on it. And so if they can't train on it, they can't use that content in citations. They can't use that content to actually educate the customer when they're coming up with answers. And coming back to these 25 questions, normally the customer is trying to figure out these answers through different sources. So how we think about these 25 questions is at every stage, they're trying to get to the bottom answer by answering the above questions. So for example, if they're at a decision stage, the last question that they have to answer is, why should they get started now? But before they actually get to that question, they might ask, what's the ROI on this investment? What results have some other people experienced by working with this business? Do they need buy-in from anybody? And if there's risk associated with making this decision. Assuming all of these boxes are checked, the final question is, should I spend this money now or later? And in a lot of cases, deals go to no decision because doing it later is better than doing it now. And so that's the number one closed loss reason inside most companies. So at every stage, the customer's trying to answer these questions and they're trying to figure out the answers to these questions from different sources. Historically, a customer would answer these questions on the website or through a sales rep or by running a search or on social. But now you have AI platforms where they are answering these questions as well. So if I was to put percentages in these boxes, it might have been that historically 30 to 40% came from sales reps, and then the rest was distributed amongst these three channels. What you're going to start to see is 30 to 40% of the answers are coming on AI platforms, and then they're using some of these other channels to amplify that education. So if they're trying to answer these 25 questions on the AI platforms, the question is, do you actually have a piece of content or multiple pieces of content for every ICP, for every vertical that answers these questions in a way that's discoverable by the AI platforms so that they can be trained and actually advocate for you when somebody is asking those deep queries? Here's another example, right? Just to bring this to light. So I presented this query of, I run a company, software company with 200 employees, 50 million in revenue. We're in workflow automation. We've been using Jira and Airtable and Zapier with some automation to figure this out, but no particular solution helps us do it all in one place. Can you give me a recommendation on how to do this? And then it kind of gave me some answers. I can use Azure or GitLab Ultimate as a way to solve this problem. Again, the depth of this type of query for an AI platform to be able to answer it, you need answers to all of these questions in a way that is discoverable so that it can come back with the answer. And so the way to do this is that transparency is the key. And transparency is one of those values that software or B2B companies in general find it hard to kind of adopt. But the idea here is that the more transparent you are, the more publicly available this information is, the more likely it is that the AI platforms will be trained on all of this information. And so if you're going to enable AI with all of this information, similar to how you would enable a sales rep, you have to take all of that information and it should live on your website, it should live on your help site, it should be on your social, it should be on YouTube, it should be on your podcast, and you should be pushing out campaigns that generate more user-generated content. You should be pushing for more reviews, asking users to put up more content for you or on your behalf, and you should be publishing a ton on every single channel as a way to train the AI, and not just top of funnel content, but something like, let's use pricing as an example. A lot of B2B companies don't like to make their pricing publicly available. Actually, it should live everywhere because the user will find it one way or another. And if they can't find it, I actually don't have a slide on this. It's like uh, I think ChatGPT talked about this recently. There's a hierarchy that they kind of go through. Well, first they'll check your website. If it's not there, then they'll check your competitors, or they'll check review sites, or they'll check Reddit. They'll kind of go through this checklist. And if your answer or pricing is not coming up, then it's not going to be in the citation. Your competitor will be in, before you know it, you're invisible on the platforms. So The culture around transparency on topics like that needs to change so that the AI platforms can actually use your information in the citations. And then finally, what you're going to see is a move to pre-qualification. So the more you enable your sales AI as your sales rep, they're going to pre-qualify for you. And so what this means is right now, in a lot of companies, especially when we do audits and for our clients and things like that, we'll see that their customer split will look something like this: 50, 30, 20 across their best fit, medium fit, and bad fit customers. But their budget allocation is equally distributed. And because their budget allocation is equally distributed, their prospects and traffic from their best fit and worst fit customers is roughly the same. But because AI platforms are trying to do what's best for the customer as well, over time, if a certain vertical that currently is coming in that is not a great fit for you, they will no longer be given that answer in citations and queries that they're asking. So you're going to start to see a shift that looks more like this, where your best fit customers will make up 80% of your customers, and it'll look the same for budget and traffic and prospects across the board. And long-term likelihood is it'll be 100, 0, 0. I don't think it'll always get to 100, but just to illustrate the point, that's the long tail, is getting more and more. If you're not a good fit for a solution, odds are the AI platform will not recommend you to the customer. And this is a good thing. That means it's like forcing you to focus on your best fit customers, which is something that most companies struggle with anyways, because companies don't want to say no to any revenue, but you should be saying no to revenue that isn't a good fit so that you can focus your product and go to market and everything else on the right types of customers. And so this is why you should be okay with decline in conversions and visitors. The goal here is not to necessarily increase everything back to previous levels. Likely what you're going to see is some type of decline in visitors, some type of decline in leads and MQLs, but you're going to start to see increases in MQL to operates and op to close rates. If these two numbers are declining, that's likely because you're not as visible and not coming up in the consideration stage for the customers that are a good fit for you. And if these numbers decline too much, obviously there's a threat. But you want to just stay on top of that to make sure that we're showing up for the queries we want to show up for. And this is a trade-off we're willing to make because it leads to a better mix of revenue for the business overall. And so the last point to make here is that thinking of AI as like a forcing function. It's going to help customers make the best possible decision. And if you think of yourself as a customer and you're trying to buy something simple, like a pair of headphones, you want it to give you the best recommendation. And on the flip side, it's going to help businesses find the best customers that stay long term and have higher LTV and NPS and all of those things. The last thing I want to run you guys through is, and then we'll get to some Q&A in the interest of time, is just thinking about the biggest value creation opportunities here. I know there's a lot of marketers on the call, but I'd say number one is just having the right CMO and a CMO that understands everything that we walk through. And if you are a CMO, making sure you're as well versed as possible in all of these things and what it means for your business. So how will you show up and enable the AI platforms like your best sales rep? How will you build iconic positioning? How will you increase the number of citations and distribution and all of those things? Making sure you have the right CMO in the right seat. That's number one. Number two, start investing heavily into content more and more, like thinking about all these different assets and resources across all stages of the journey. And then finally, I would say leverage AI to move faster. So how can we, for example, leverage AI to do some customer analysis for us, or do analysis of the paid media programs that we're running, or help us with resourcing, or be able to do more with less, so that we can kind of focus on some of these other initiatives. What I would not do, at least not yet, is leverage AI to create content at scale, because it can be a tool in the toolbox for creation, but it should not be the driver of creation, because that's how it becomes commoditized really quickly, and you lose your edge and what really separates you and what makes you iconic in a particular marketplace. And that's pretty much it. I will stop there, and I'll just add a couple of CTAs before we get to Q&A. One I'll say is, if some of this resonates and your company's kind of struggling with this, we'd love to chat with you. Just set up a time with us, or just email me and we'll try to figure that out with you. And then the last thing would be, we have a C-level marketing program for any marketers that are interested in leveling up. I've linked that in the slide, so we'll send that over to you as well. And with that said, let's move to Q&A.